I'm going to teach you all that you need to know to thrive with patch 10.1's new gear upgrade system. It really is quite the change. It may even seem like a lot, but in reality, you'll feel more able to succeed. And as the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy has printed on its back, don't panic. Put simply, the old Valor Point system for Mythic Plus is gone, and this new upgrade system exists across all game content except for PvP. Blizzard didn't put it there because they didn't want to break what already worked with Season 1. So essentially in this, when new gear drops, regardless of its source, it will have upgrade levels, and depending on the content that you do, a few of those levels may even be filled out. So, how do you upgrade gear? Well, you do that with two different resources, Flightstones and Crests. These are almost like the old Valor and Justice points of the bygone eras of the game, but it's a system that is a lot more alt-friendly, and it's quite generous, just like our kind of revamped Patreon. Here's the dead cool loot for the month of May, and beyond that, we've brought back the Lore Walking podcast. We've got an episode on Neltharion, multiple behind-the-scenes videos, vlogs from me, on our plans, how I work, early access content, and more. And as time goes on, I'm going to be putting more and more and more into this, so hop aboard at that link down below, get some extra content, get some loot, and with that said, let's go. All upgrades in this system require Flightstones, which are infinitely farmable. That's right, you get them from doing anything, be it a world quest, a dungeon, LFR, heroic, rare mob, public event. They have no cap. Well, they are infinitely farmable, but you can only hold 2,000 on your character at once, so you will need to use them. Basically, they're not going to be much of a limiting factor, so don't worry. The better the item that you're upgrading, the higher the cost will be in Flightstones, but harder content will drop more Flightstones. The next part in our puzzle is Crests, or as they're fully named, Shadowflame Crests. They are our second thing, and beyond a certain point, you will need Crests to upgrade your gear. Now, you can only get so many Crests per week, with the cap increasing on a weekly basis. There are multiple types of crest, each corresponding to how difficult the content that you're doing actually is. Now, to fully understand this, we also need to bring actual gear itself into the mix. So, you know how gear from Mythic Plus in the old system would just say Mythic, like 1 out of 13, denoting where it came from and how upgraded it is? Well, the same thing's happening here, but with a few new labels, which are Adventurer, Veteran, Champion, Hero, and Mythic. And with the exception of Mythic, all of these can be upgraded. Hero can be upgraded only 5 times, all the others, though, have a total of 8 upgrade levels. But what's smart here is that there's actually overlap between the gear item level ranges here. So, Explorer 1 out of 8, your bog standard, like weakest gear. It's Explorer, rank 1 out of 8, item level 376. If you upgraded that to Explorer 4 out of 8, it would be item level 385. Now, Explorer 5 out of 8 gear, that is eye level 389. The next level of gear up, Adventurer gear. Well, Adventurer gear 1 out of 8 is also 389. Now, this initially seems confusing having this overlap, but what the result is that the gear that you get lasts a bit longer because gear from somewhat easier content that you did further back ago, it can be upgraded to a decently better item level, to a point. This has some amazing upsides when we get into, say, raid content. Anyway, gear can be upgraded to, say, Adventurer 4 out of 8, which is the same as Explorer 8 out of 8, using only Flightstones. This equates to item level 398, so you can get your character fully to 398 in a 100% grindable, at your own pace fashion. This, by the way, is what corresponds to heroic dungeons, Mythic 0, world content, that kind of thing. Beyond that, though, crests are involved. Now, you can earn a total of 10 of each type of crest per week. This cap is going to increase over time, and because of how that works, you'll essentially not have to worry about the cap quite soon. Now, there are 4 types of crest, and this It feels confusing when I explain it all at once, but when you see it in game, it'll make sense. So they are called Whelpling, Drake, Worm, and Aspect. Okay? And those roughly correspond to LFR, Normal, Heroic, and Mythic raid difficulties, and of course, their Mythic plus equivalents. So Whelpling crests will be quite plentiful from the game. They will drop from LFR bosses, Mythic plus dungeons below 6, and even stuff in the Zarlek Cavern. And with these, you can upgrade your early adventurer gear to item level 411. Drake crests then come from normal raid, Mythic plus dungeons between 6 and 10, which I will note are only going to have one affix active now, some weekly events, and a Zarlek thing that I'll explain in a little bit. Now, these can bring your gear all the way up to item level 424, which is pretty damn sweet. But if you're doing no group content, this is pretty much as high as you'll be getting, and yeah, it won't be at a breakneck pace. Okay, next I'm going to talk about Drake and Worm crests. These are from normal and heroic raiding, respectively, and the equivalent keystone level brackets, of course, to those. Now, for raiders, they give us something that we've never really had before, and I'm going to walk you through this by just using a sort of typical head of the curve, like kind of mid-guild as an example, which would be us. Okay, so let's say you start off in normal mode. While clearing normal mode, you will be earning champion gear and Drake crests. Now, these Drake crests can be used to upgrade your champion gear that you get from normal mode up to champion 4 out of 8, and they can also be used to upgrade your veteran gear to veteran 8 out of 8. Yeah, so that older gear that you perhaps got from sources like LFR or low mythic, you can actually still upgrade that from doing normal. So even if you get 0 loot drops from doing the raid, you can still upgrade some of your gear. Next then, heroic time. So let's say you finally make it to heroic. You start progressing heroic. Bosses now drop hero gear, and you begin to earn worm crests. These worm crests bring your hero gear from hero rank 1 all the way up to hero rank 4. But they can also bring your champion gear from champion 5 to champion 8. And that means that the gear that you earned in normal mode isn't dead to you, right? So even if you're progging heroic, you get no loot drops, the gear that you already earned from normal mode can be upgraded with the currency you get from doing heroic, meaning you'll always walk out of raid night having progressed your character in a deterministic fashion with no RNG. And then finally, there are aspect crests. These will upgrade your gear from hero 4 out of 5 to hero 5 out of 5, which is basically the same item level as low mythic. And they're also used for some crafting stuff that I'll touch on in a little bit. Now, for Mythic Plus players, this is going to feel rather similar to you. It's quite generous in pace, though. Now, the trade-off is that each bit of gear that you get does have a ceiling, as opposed to how it used to work in the past. But as a plus, though, the vault actually drops higher item level loot than it used to for you, and that loot that is at a higher item level can then be upgraded. Now, while all of this might seem a bit overwhelming to you, it does just boil down to this. Everything gives you Flightstones, harder things give you crests, or crest fragments, I'll talk about those, the fragments are turned into the crests. Anyway, you get your Flightstones, you get your crests, you get your gear, you upgrade it based on what the tooltip says, and you'll be getting those resources anyway. You don't actually have to think about it that much. Basically, the difference now is that progress is always rewarded. Now that I've got the basics out of the way, let's just talk about a few more specifics. The first thing I want to cover is fragments. So here's the deal. Crests have 0 RNG to them, right? Instead, you get a fixed amount of fragments for doing content. As an example, bosses drop 10 and end bosses drop 15. Timed keys drop 12 and depleted keys drop 5. You just turn these fragments in at a vendor and you get your crests. Now, the cap starts at 150 per type, and it increases by 150 per week. Now, because crests cost 15 fragments, overall, you're starting off with 10 crests of each type. And, well, the way that that increases just means that this will almost feel like an uncapped thing not too far into the season. And yes, it is somewhat currency bloat, But the reason why they've done this with the fragments is so that they get to make this be purely deterministic with the pacing that they want. Alt friendliness and some catch-up stuff is really key here though. So, to put a long story short, upgrading a new highest item level in a given slot by using crests or getting an item level drop means that bringing any other item in that slot up to that item level will cost you 0 crests and half the Flightstones. And what that basically means is, say you get a high item level trinket that is not BIS. Well, that still is going to be a bit of a win for you, because you'll be able to, let's just say you get a lower item level trinket, but it's a really good one. Well, you can actually then upgrade that using no crests and half the Flightstones. And then the Flightstone discount applies on an account-wide basis. So this is, just way faster for your alts. Okay, so for us raiders and Mythic Plussers, we basically are just getting more for doing what we were already doing. But for the world content people, this does represent a nice old increase in your access to powerful gear. You can earn Drake crests, giving you access to a full set of item level 424 gear, which is mid-normal Wraith level. Now, by doing Farak Assaults, which is the new version of Primal Storms, you can get some Drake crests. This is kind of almost like earning your Storm Sigils in Season 1 as an analogy, I guess. And by the way, the gear from the Farak Assaults looks sick as fuck. I'll be doing those for sure. And then down in the new zone, you're going to find rares, you're going to find treasures. There's the Sniffin' Seekin', there's the bartering minigame, world quests, loads of public events, as well as a weekly quest, and then there's the big weekly event called Researchers Under Fire. Now, a whole bunch of this stuff, basically you'll get bags of loot, depending on what you do, and these can contain unearthed fragment coins. Now, there's a vendor in Zaralek that lets you turn these in for crest fragments, basically enough to earn 2 Whelpling and 2 Drake crests per week. Those unearthed coins also drop from those public events, of which there are 18, which really is a lot to do in that zone. I actually think they're set to achieve a bit of a solid Timeless Isles-like vibe with it. But overall, that's just an example of how, as a world content player who's perhaps soloing, you do actually have access to these crests for upgrading your gear. Crafted gear, though, is also involved here. Basically, the system is very similar to before. The difference is that now enchanters make an enchanted crest. That will require a few crests of whatever difficulty level you're dealing with, and a spark, just like how the sparks worked in the previous season. However, with the sparks, you just get one of those every 2 weeks, starting from the week the patch comes out, and that's just it until the end of the season. And the crafting gear, by the way, is item level-wise a smidge more powerful this time round. Now also, for the less powerful crafted gear, you can actually turn 150 Flightstones in to get an enchanted Flightstone, and this is used to craft a Titan Training Matrix 5. It's a new Titan Training Matrix, and this brings your gear up to eye level 395, which is pretty damn handy for Catchup. And I suppose one thing that I really want to highlight here and emphasize is just the overall impact. Let's even take the Great Vault. So, Vault gear can be upgraded. That's kind of a new experience for us raiders. Getting normal mode Vault gear won't feel as bad because you can upgrade it to Heroic. The flexibility here basically just increases the range of usefulness of all gear in the game. And it's similar with your tier gear. Those maybe normal, those normal difficulty pieces of tier gear that aren't as strong, but you do feel you need to use to complete your 4 set, those won't feel as bad when you can upgrade them, right? And, finishing your tier, it really won't be much of a problem. The Catalyst actually kicks in at week 5, and Sarkareth drops an Omni token, which means that the raid actually has got 6 tier-dropping bosses, with one of those being the Omni token that can turn into any piece, which is just incredible compared to the past. So even that is a big, big upgrade. And even as that applies to Mythic Plus, now, Mythic Plus players can no longer upgrade gear from, upgrade level 1 all the way up to 13, right? And in a way that is a bit of a loss, but also this new system, it does allow for much more upgrading in general. And with how the Vault and affixes work, like, I do think you're going to be pulling ahead. Like, there's no seasonal affix. Many affixes have been nerfed. They kick in at +7 and +14, up from +4 and +7, meaning that doing like a Mythic +15, like that'll have 2 affixes down from 3. There won't be a Thundering as an example. So in a way, it will be more easy, maybe more approachable. As an example, Mythic +13 only has 1 affix. Like, that really is easier than a 13 right now, and doing a 13 will get you a piece of Champion 3 gear, which is item level 421 and can be upgraded all the way up to 437, right? And then with how the crest fragment caps increase every week, like, honestly, this will almost feel uncapped in not that much time, which I do think is a real big win. Again, you earn 12 fragments for timing a key and 5 for depleting, and that's like versus Valor, where with this new system, the difficulties actually mean that you're rewarded for playing the, appropriate difficulty to get the better type of fragment, rather than just spamming +2s for Valor, which is pretty boring. So then, with that said, this is how the new system works. I've not went into giga detail about like gearing strategies here. That would make this video absurdly long. Today the mission is to learn the new upgrade system, because this is something they may actually extend to future seasons if it works out. Now, I'm going to have a solo leveling guide out a bit later this week, and we'll make a season gearing guide with all of the big nerdy optimizations too when the time is right. Because honestly, this time around, even personally, I want to go full big dirty bastard mode on this patch. Yeah, and hopefully this works out. I think this is really, really exciting for the game. Okay, next up, watch this if you'd like to learn a bunch more useful stuff about this patch. Thanks for watching. If you want to support us and get some dope loot, early access, behind the scenes, additional content, you can check out the Patreon down below. All right, cheers, and I'll see you next time.